Hi, everybody. Just kind of testing this out, see if it's going to go. Waiting on Dawn here, waiting on Grant. I'll be back in a moment. Hi, everybody. Just waiting on Grant and waiting on Dawn. I hope they show up. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk to you guys for, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes. Hi, David. I think we have a double stream, so I will give everybody enough time to find this link too. So I don't know. I'm not the best at this broadcasting live yet. We'll get it figured out. I made a date with Don Schmitt's tie today, so I hope I look nice and professional. I've been cooking in the restaurant at the end of the universe lately, so that's what's been going on with me. There hasn't been too many interviews going on. A few done that I haven't posted yet, waiting for the okay and the verification that I'm not spewing gossip or infringing on somebody's research. So I'll be right back. I'm going to continue setting this up. Here comes Grant.
You're live already.
Yeah, I wanted to see if, well, in YouTube, you can set like a promo to go live. So I did that. And I thought when I started our Zoom link, it would go to that link. But so there's double streams right now, but only one is live. It's like there's a promo and there's a few people in there. So I went in there and I said, hey, there's a double stream. Go back to my channel. You'll find it. So that's what I'm doing. Technical difficulties, Grant. Got to work them out.
Glad you got it figured out.
And see, this is where it's like, I emailed a couple people yesterday and tried to work this out. And I was like, I should have just emailed Desta.
Yeah, she's not here though. She's
I
busy.
know, but I think she might be checking her emails. I'm not sure. So
Yeah.
it's Destin and I don't chat often, but when we do, it's about like these little technical difficulty things.
There you go. Well, you'll have it figured out. So the link that I put up is going to be okay?
Probably not. It's the one that I'm trying to defeat right now. But I just shared one to my Facebook saying live now. And so can you go to my Facebook and share it? Because that'll be the one. If I share it to yours, you still have to go in and approve it. Here comes Dawn. Here comes Dawn. Hi, Dawn.
It's on your Facebook?
Oh. Hi, Grant. Look
How you
at
doing,
that.
Don? Thanks
President of the United States. Who would have? Well, I would have voted for you, Grant. So
Does that say United States or does it say President of Ufology and Consciousness? I don't know.
oh, that's the official seal. That's the official seal.
He might be Prime Minister of Canada before all is said and done.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, that may be up for grabs in short order. Who knows? Good picture, Grant.
It is.
Oh, I'm still trying to figure out. Oh, hang on. So I shared the YouTube here. Share.
It's the one where I said live now. I'm going to share it. I'm going to share it to Don's right now too.
Okay.
We had a double stream.
Oh, well.
Not that Don and I would know what's going on here.
No. First time for both of us, I know.
So how are things down there? Have you got snow like we've got? I hope you don't, because some of your snow comes our way here.
No, Chicago's been getting most of everything. We've been everything's been skirting south.
Okay.
Chicago gets hit one after the other. Our backyard. It's warm today, upper 40s.
Oh,
so
wow.
But we still had maybe 3 inches of snow through the backyard. It's still all white. You get into Milwaukee, everything's dark.
Wow. Yeah, I've never seen this much snow. We had a big flood here in 97, which basically the south half of the province was underwater. And we got a lot more snow this year, so we'll see what happens. It's like we get like 3 or 4 inches, and then it gets cold, and then 3 or 4 inches, and then it gets cold again, and it's just like day after day shoveling. It's unbelievable.
Wow, just monotonous. But here we're about 10 inches shy of precipitation for the entire last year.
Wow.
So they're already talking that we're going to have a very rainy spring just to catch up, because
Okay.
there's nothing even a long range forecast for snow. Next month we're already at the transition, so send it down. We'll take it.
Yeah. You think by now we would have learned how to do this? Have pipes going around the country in different directions where you move the water from one place to another when it's too much here, there's not enough there.
Well, you recall when they were seriously considering towing with freight boats a chunk of iceberg.
Oh yeah. I remember that.
On the Pacific Coast down to California. So I'm sure it's feasible. It's floating.
Hey, you got to try all the wrong ways first, right?
That's science. That is science. That is science.
So, I'm so glad the three of us could finally get together. I think the world has just been busy for all of us. Like Grant, I know you're always busy. My restaurant at the end of the universe is keeping me busy, but it's so like relaxing to have you guys here together today. I just want to kind of recap of what we've missed over the last year. Don, I want to hear what's going on with the Roswell Journal that we kind of talked about last time. I want to know what's going on with ICER. I think Grant maybe had a few questions from like maybe our chat group and things we were discussing. And if Grant, if I'm remembering right, it was along the research lines of your Wilbert Smith book and stuff you've dug into. And then of course, we'll take some chat room questions. I'll ask all our YouTubers to put their questions in capital letters so I can see them. And I was trying to think what else. And then of course, we want just the rundown of the current state of ufology and your thoughts on the, in my head, I keep saying, oi, MSG, but AOI, MSG, Gillibrand, and, you know, the whole rodeo that we're in. So
remember that, yeah.
That little thing is going on.
By design.
And then maybe to start us off, Don, I think you guys did get to have the Roswell Festival. It didn't get canceled this year, and you got to go. Like, no,
we had it last year.
Good. And I think you went and start us off there. Tell us what happened there. Tell us about the museum. Anything going on with that?
Fine. So right now,
Go ahead.
Well, the thing is, this year will be the 75th anniversary, and I was happy to get back to the museum after a full year's absence, as we all were essentially locked down, so to speak. But was very pleased that coming off of last year, 2021, it was our highest attendance for visitors in our 27-year history. So in the face of all this, whether it was pent up demand or people, we focused on promoting within a 500-mile radius, people in driving range. And it paid off wonderfully. The gift shop and the online gift shop. And I know I have colleagues that constantly, well, you guys are making money. Well, then get some research done without it. I mean, I'm sorry. The very scientists that you people admire, they get grants, they get special funding, they get all types of assistance. And we so much as write a book, and Grant knows this too. I mean, just like that. Well, you guys are making money. Well, okay, and you work for nothing. So stop it. I mean, let's not even, go there. So the museum is making money, but it's still a nonprofit organization. They have the largest UFO library in the world. We have a wonderful research facility of over 100,000 cases from all over the world, and all accessible. The point being that you can come in at 9 o'clock in the morning and stay till 5 o'clock at night, come back the next day and the next day and the next month if you'd like. And that's the whole point, that our doors are open, as opposed to a private collection that maybe you'll get to look at the file cabinets and that'll be the extent of it.
Do you guys?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, me first, Grant, then you.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Do you guys also archive other researchers' work at the museum, or have you considered that if you don't?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yep.
In fact, that's why we were disappointed, because originally that our good late friend Stanton Friedman had promised that we were going to receive all of his files. And he was initially sending all of his books and tapes and discs and so on. So we have boxes and boxes from Stan in that regard. It's just that, and I'm happy that that Grant has been there to the archives in New Brunswick, and I'm sure he's planning on going again. So he'll remain our contact person in that regard, especially if it provides any potential leads, on Roswell, because that's what we were hoping for. Nobody was in the public eye more than Stanton Friedman. He had a 10-year jump on us, and besides that, he was doing this every day on a public forum, and as a result, I'm sure he received a lot of tidbits, a lot of names, possible participants, and little chance that they're still alive, but family wise, yeah, we still would like to, talk to, a representative of that individual, and with the hope that maybe the father, the mother, a brother, said something before they passed on. By the way, I was at Roswell in 47, and this is what I observed. This is what I held in my hands, that type of thing. So that's why our investigation continues in that regard, because as far as even the families, even secondhand testimony, if it corroborates firsthand, it's still very significant. And ask any lawyer, ask any judge.
Grant,
So,
what was your question?
Well, you sort of took my question. Now I've got two questions. So let me ask, I'll just deal with the Stanton one first. I actually have, unfortunately, I photographed the documents when I was there the last time.
right.
I actually have it on a click. If you want it, I've got it on a OneDrive. Now I'm going to go back. This time I'm going to scan the stuff because photographs are, not the best. The photographing documents, I'm going to scan it. But I've got 6,000 pages of his material that I've got on a OneDrive that I can actually just click and you can have access to it. And that's
Wonderful.
what I want to do is put it on a drive where. And the funny thing was, a lot of people wanted to see it, and then I would give it to them because that much material. I wasn't never big into that whole story. So I said to them, if you see anything interesting, let me know. So I would just click and they would get the whole access to all the files. Nobody ever contacted me back and said, oh, Rick, look at this document. This is really interesting or whatever. I sent it to a few people. But you mentioned the fact that there are some interesting things there. As you know, Stan didn't really file stuff all that well. He had everything outside of filing cabinets. So I think they're talking 4 years to get all this material ready. They got 4 archivists working on this. But the one thing I found was very interesting. I don't know if you saw it. They had a one thing where, and she actually provided to a newspaper. I didn't see it when I was there, but it was some guy, just a handwritten message on a piece of paper, said, here's the piece of the Roswell medal that I promised you. And it's attached on a baggie onto this thing. And I said to the archivist, I said, you better put that under lock and key. That's going to disappear. So now if you go to the Stanton Friedman files, this piece of metal now, whether it'll ever get analyzed or whatever, but there is actually a piece of metal that he received. There was some photographs that he got. It was kind of interesting stuff. And at one point they told me that he had taped a lot of his phone calls, which I said he did. I said, well, who's the archivist? Because they've got an archivist that works just on video and audio. So when I go back, that's the other thing I'm going to be looking at is Stan's phone calls that he was taping with various people. And that's what that I know, that when you get a collection, that there's a lot of stuff that you have confidentiality, you can't release it or whatever. And a lot of little leads that you never really did get to the bottom of, that stuff is going to be in those files. And it's just a matter of going through and someone knowing where to look and what's important. And there's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff that Stan had.
Well, exactly. And the point being that many people wouldn't recognize something significant.
Yeah, exactly.
If it hit between the eyes. So I think that's where, considering what Stan was looking for, what he was investigating, what he was concentrating, what he was focused on. And that's where, for those of us, in a similar camp, and I think in your case too, Grant, as far as anything dealing as far as with elected officials, anything dealing as far as presidentially, because we know that Stan was constantly writing letters to politicians with the hope of some support, some cooperation. And again, it's a matter of historic record that in some cases they did respond to him. Well, when we worked with late Congressman Stephen Schiff, and I know Stan wasn't part of that, but at least I was going to Washington. I would meet with him there. I would meet with him at his office in Albuquerque. And I think that's where we were in the forefront for so much of what is going on right now, because so many of our colleagues believe that this is a first, that this is the first time that Washington has actually expressed interest in the subject. Well, go back to school starting back in 1947. And that's where Stan had as it turns out, was it over 60 years? 60-year collection?
Years.
61 years.
Yeah.
So that's more than, that's more than CUFOS, MUFON. If NICAP had continued on, fine, APRO, that type of thing. So overall, there would be little competition. And as we both know, and as the archivist described to us, that he collected everything and anything.
Everything. Yeah.
And as a result, I'm sure much of that, just like many of the books, are collectibles. And again, it just takes the right person to recognize the value, the significance of much of his material. And thank God that things were preserved, because we've seen too often in the past where families rush to dispose of a lifetime of research, because they have no concept, they have no grasp of what it might mean to those of us, still out in the trenches, so to speak.
Yeah, and you did mention, which some people may not realize, because Stan's now been a few years, he's been passed away, that he was meticulous in what he got. Like, just to give you an example, on the Lazar collection that he had, and he was not a big Lazar fan. He didn't think it was all garbage, but he had everything. Right. He had the court transcripts of that big court case with the pandering. He had the documents that filed where Bob Lazar set up the company with him, with who had what stock and stuff. He had this correspondence with George Knapp, which is about 200 pages back and forth. And George is writing these long 6 and 7 page letters, trying to convince him why we went down this road, answering all his questions. So you made this key point that Stan was meticulous in getting everything. He just didn't skim over a case. He talked to everybody. He tried to get all the material, and he filed all this stuff away. So it's a gold mine, and it still is going to be a few years because of the COVID thing for them to get this stuff all sorted out. Because and you have to give the archives credit, because this was an archives that has no collections. It has no private collections like this. It's an archives. It's a provincial archives, which has like records of marriages and stuff with properties and stuff like that. That's all it is. And they were under a lot of static for taking this collection, because it's 4 years, like 4 full-time archivists working on this. There's a lot of money to put all this material together, but he was just so famous in Fredericton that they basically decided that they were going to do this. So you got to give credit to the archivists, and they have no clue. When I went in there, they didn't know who anybody. They're asking me, well, what do we look for? And I said, well, you got to sort out the skeptics, because he spent a lot of time with skeptics. Have one for Roswell. And so a couple of people have sort of helped them out. And you may even I can put you in contact with the archivist that's dealing with it, because they are actually looking for people to sort of give them advice on what to look for. At one point, they asked me, like, for example, you and I and everybody who's a reacher you have a little piece of paper that has somebody's phone number on it or something. And Stan had thousands and thousands and thousands of these pieces of papers with a couple of notes on it. She said, what do we do? You throw these out? I said, no, put them in a box. And somebody, it may be you or somebody else, can go through it, and you'll see this name and you'll suddenly realize this is important. Don't throw anything out. So I was sort of giving them sort of advice on how to do it, because they have no idea what ufology is about. They have no idea which end is up, and they're starting from square one. And as we mentioned, none of this stuff was in filing cabinets. It was like stacked up. But Stan knew where it all was. And that's what she said to Stan. She said, well, Stan, how come he had 11 filing cabinets, I think, but other than that, everything was in stacks of paper in the garage and the basement and stuff. And she said to him, Stan, how come you didn't file all this stuff? He said, I didn't have a secretary, Stan was, That's what people don't realize, that you're doing it on your own. It was Stan himself typing all those letters and making all those contacts and filing all this stuff. And so, a lot of the stuff has to be sorted out, but it was 15 pallets of material, of boxes, and he has all the tape, all the stuff, and just unbelievable.
And I remember originally speaking with the archivist, and I had even offered to come up, and it was just before COVID. Yeah. So we were actually planning on that at one point. And when she was describing to me just the number of van loads of material, and I think our last conversation, Grant, I even suggested, and my impression is the house was already sold, correct?
Yeah.
And that if one would have had the chance to check out if Stan had any hiding places, if there was a false vent or some ductwork or anything, that again, if anybody at least would have realized the significance of certain things, it would have been him. And so it most likely is too late right now. Well, let's hope that we can find a few little gemstones and just even some leads, some witnesses, that type of thing.
Yeah, are you planning to go up there? Because the one case I did, the first case I looked for when I went down there was the Cuban case. You know, the 67 Cuban case where they have the UFO coming in, and Stan was involved, and that UFO organization that was involved where they sued the government, they were involved. Bob Pratt filed the FOIA, and then it was, I think it was Zeckel threatened NSA. He said, "You give us the stuff, or we're going to the Cuban embassy." And the FBI showed up that afternoon at his house and scared the living daylights out of him. And that case, the actual letter to the guy, we actually have the letter of the guy who he was talking to and his correspondence with this guy. And that's why I was looking for the phone calls, because that stuff is there. So Stan, maybe some of this stuff is right out in the open, because the Cuban case, he didn't really seem to hide anything. We know who the witnesses are. We know who was feeding that story of the Cuban case to Stan Friedman and the National Enquirer and all those people.
And as far as I've ever observed, they've never done anything with the Cuban case as far as on any of the TV shows, have they?
No. And it's pretty clear. I mean, you can see, and when Stan is working on it, and he's trying to, you know, how Stan was, he's trying to, can you remember anything else? Is there any other names and stuff? And all the FOIAs from the National Enquirer. Again, it's an extensive thing, and it's a key case that was pretty clear. That was picked up by U.S. Navy intelligence in Florida. They were listening to all the calls coming in from the plane, and the one plane, the wingman describes the plane evaporating in the air as they lock onto this UFO, and the plane is gone. And that's a critically important case. But those are that's the first one I went, and it was there. So when I go back, I'll scan it. Are you planning to go there at any point? Because you have the Airbnbs, which are pretty close. It's like a college town. It's right on the campus. So they have a lot of Airbnbs, which are pretty cheap. You can, down the street, you can get a place for, $50 to $60 a night, and sit there and they're very good. Like any archives, you've been to archives, they're very good. They'll help you and show you where to go and where this stuff is, and they know, they know how to the thing is works. And it's an amazing place just to sit there and look at stuff that you realize only the archivist and Stan ever touched that piece of paper. And you're looking like it's like in King Tut's tomb. You're looking for something that nobody has ever seen before that will blow this thing wide open.
So getting back even to the Cuban case very quickly, and was it the late Bob Todd that was paid a visit by the FBI? Yeah. Wanting to know what he had heard. Yeah. And as far as
I think he had gone to the idea was he'd gone to the NSA and said, you either tell us what's going on or we're going to the Cuban embassy. And that afternoon he got visited by the FBI.
And the thing is, Todd is gone, Zeckel's gone, now Stan's gone. So I mean, if this stuff isn't preserved, I mean, it's a case that I think most have heard of within the UFO community. But again, they've never seen it portrayed. They've never seen it actually investigated. And Zeckel, this would be a number of years ago, because he lived in Western Wisconsin with his parents at the end. Yeah. And I was in contact with his brother with the hope that I might be able to secure his files. Yeah. And that would have been one of the cases. As well as Del Rio. He was doing some things as far as on the Del Rio crash, whether it happened in 48, 50, 52. I mean, take your pick, that type of case. But again, third-party interference. The family gets involved, and it's like, well, we're not going to turn it over to you, but we're not going to keep it either. So
that's terrible. That's terrible.
So you describe it. I mean, as far as the archives would actually be taking the time when they're shorthanded, and they don't normally do this as you describe. Yeah. So, but Stan knew what he was doing in that regard, because I'll be honest with you, Grant, at the museum in Roswell, if not for when I would be there, which is 5-6 times a year, 4 days, 5 days at a time. They're so short-staffed as well. Nobody would. Everything would still be in boxes. Yeah. So at least they're able to devote a daily amount of time.
Yeah, and there's not that many people do it. You probably know that when you go to an archives, everybody's doing all this kind of stuff. And when you go there, there's literally nobody there. I mean, you may go to archives, I go to archives, but how many researchers actually go to archives to look at people's collections? Almost never. I mean, I've been to the James McDonald collection. I bet you there's been no more than 20 people have ever looked at that material. And when you see like James McDonald's or Stanton Friedman's or some of these collections, they're absolutely massive. It's just even the stuff you're working on. I mean, with Roswell, I mean, that's probably the biggest Roswell collection in the world that's there. And it's just a matter of going in there and even just copying it for yourself so that when you pass and you put the stuff to Roswell, that the material will go with you to Roswell, because now you can scan this stuff. And Stan's, the other thing they had done was Stan's computer broke just before he died, and they had to recover the hard drive. And I've been talking to them, and the hard drive, then it's going to be word searchable. So all the stuff that's on the hard drive, you're going to be actually be able to search this stuff very quickly, rather than going through boxes of paper that take endless amounts of time to sort out and figure out what's going on. I mean, so the computer is going to be accessible. I think they maybe finished it, and all the audio, video. They were showing me these tapes from the 1960s that Stan had, that he had been on Merv Griffin's show or something, and these old tapes where Stan had collected literally everything, and all the audios and videos and stuff like that. It's just amazing collection. But the unfortunate part was, when I first went there, they'd only done, I think, 21 boxes. I went through 15 of them, and basically I wasn't reading anything. That's why I gave opportunities to people to, with a click of a mouse, I can give you access to 6,000 pages of Stan's files, go through them, because you know what I always advise people, when you go to the archives, you don't read anything. You haven't got time to read anything. You just sit there and you scan the stuff as fast as you can scan it. You can read it when you get home, because you're say if you're only there for 6 or 10 days or whatever, you can only do maybe 500-600 pages a day scanning. You've got to scan as much as you can, unless you're intending to sit there for 6 months.
You mentioned all the tapes. That all needs to be digitized.
Yeah, they're doing all that. They're doing all that material.
Oh, they are. Oh, see, like at Kufos, we digitized everything we could on Hynek, and a lot of it was already lost, gone. There were reel-to-reel tapes that went back to the 50s, and couldn't salvage them. But
wow. The one tape, let me ask you, interrupt here, because you were with the Hynek. The one film that we really need, the whole story with the Nimitz, where the object drops from 29 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. J.L. and Hynek came to Winnipeg when I first got involved. The reason I got involved was there was some sightings happening in this town called Carmen, and then the local TV station went out there and they caught this thing jumping off the ground. It jumped from ground level, from the rumors we heard, from ground level to 5,000 feet in 1/8 of a second, and it was caught on film. J.L. and Hynek came and got 2 copies of that video. That video is missing. Do you think there's any chance we could that stuff is out there? It's 12 inches of film. Because that's a historic thing. That's the Nimitz thing on film. We had it going the other way. Theirs dropped from 29 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. This went from ground level to 5,000 feet. It was caught by a TV crew on camera in 1/8 of a second, 3 frames of film.
I'm making a note of that, and I can start checking tomorrow. Unfortunately, a lot of Hynek's files were lost.
And some went to Phoenix, right?
Right, when he moved to Scottsdale.
But didn't someone run off with a lot of files there?
Yes. And just like the APRO files, same people. Okay. And but I don't know that he took all. I thought we had most of the film still in Chicago. That it just would have been bulky, and he would have had it all boxed up and shipped later. That he felt. But I'll give you another example, Grant. He had the Lindmeyer Observatory out of the right on Lake Michigan there. That was owned by Northwestern, where he was head of the astronomy department. And right after Hynek died, Mark Rodiger and Mark Chesney, another associate of Dr. Hynek's, immediately went there, hoping that he may have had files. He may have hidden certain things there. Everything had been cleared out, and it wasn't by Hynek.
Wow.
So they've always been on top of this, and as a result, it's one of the reasons that even like at Kufos, that we were always concerned about visitors, unscheduled visitors, and people who just wanted to go through files, and all of a sudden, papers were missing, files were missing, photographs were missing.
Yeah.
But I will definitely look into this and then get back to you.
Yeah, because that's what does happen. That's another one we had where I worked on the Dr. Eric Walker story in the 1980s and 1990s, and
Yes,
he had
yeah.
a file. He was keeping a file on us. We knew he had a UFO file. And after he died, his son was a medical doctor. T. Scott Crane talked to his son and said, did you ever see a UFO file? He said, yeah, there was a UFO file. It had two crashes, one in the West and one in Pennsylvania. And he said, I looked at it, he said, and then when my father died, they had most of the files were at Penn State, but when they moved the files from the house to Penn State, he said that file was gone. So that's the thing is people come and clear it out. They know what to look for or whatever. But here was the son was a medical doctor and said clearly it had two crashes in this thing, and one was in the West and one was in Pennsylvania.
See, one of the problems at Socorro in 1964 was that by the time Hynek and some of the other Blue Book and even Air Force and even from Holloman Air Force Base, they arrived on the scene, the police officers and even the locals that were flooding into the area of the touchdown, the landing, had obliterated their because originally they were footprints, where those two figures were standing, and I've had witnesses who were there sketch, and the sketches are identical even to the size. You're talking about an 8-year-old child as far as the actual footprints. Well, anyway, there were a lot of photographs, a lot of film taken, and I'll never forget talking as far as with Paul Hardin, who was the archivist and the historian in Socorro. And when I asked him, so who went around and confiscated, retrieved everything, every photograph, every film that was taken as part of the investigation? It was Hynek. Hynek was instructed by the Air Force to grab everything, which he did. And so there's a whole slew of FOIAs that need to be done regarding that. And then you had the Dexter Ann Arbor as far as the Michigan sightings in '66. And one of the tapes that is missing, and it's a witness that it's not part of the Blue Book investigation, but there was an Air Force officer on leave who happened to be in the area at the time, and Hynek spoke to him for the better part of an afternoon, all on tape, and he described it as well and as close as anyone. And yet the Air Force, they suppressed, that witness being one of their own from being part of the file. So that's where we have to continue to perform due diligence, and that there's a lot of archival, and that's where Stan, he was always correct in that. Thank God there are people that are willing to take the time to wade through the files, the materials. We shouldn't expect answers to come easily. They never have. God knows they don't. And as a result, thank God there are those with the tenacity to spend the time at their expense to make this a very monumental effort on behalf of all of us. So a lot of work to be done yet, Grant. A lot of work to be done yet.
Yeah. What kind of the one collection? One quick question. The one question that I had before we started this route was, what kind of big collections I've been at the Roswell Museum working on files. What big collections do they have that people might recognize they got it in the vault in the back there, right?
Right. And I know that the George Fawcett, his entire collection came there, and George probably had a head start on even Stan. And I remember it took us years to go through all of his material. And then there's a collection from Canada that is all in white binders. Wow. But it's just a wonderful collection. It's on a turn wheel, so you can spin it. And the binders are all facing, outward. So many of the best Canadian cases are there in that regard, but we are continually, getting people within the field. I don't want to go to a university because then nobody ever see it again and wind up down in the basement. And I'm affiliated with a university now, yes, but again, you're not preventing access. Yeah. And I think that's the best thing I can ever say about the museum, that it's accessible. Yeah. But you are correct, Grant. We have 4 rooms at the moment that are filled from top to bottom with nothing but boxes.
Wow.
And so
we'll have to go back there again.
It comes down to manpower.
Yeah, that's the thing. People don't realize that it's a meticulous job, and you got to do it right, and you have to have some expertise on how to archive stuff, but I'm sure you must agree with me that it's got to be the most exciting thing in the world is to go through a collection. It's like being in King Tut's tomb. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
like what are we going to find here? And this is our chance to get some answers, and because everybody's got 100 secrets that they never told people for whatever
Well,
reason. It's in their files.
and that's the wonderful thing. Like Jan Aldridge, Barry Greenwood, they've been spending a lot of time scanning all of the QFOS files.
Yeah.
And they're with Dave Marler now, the good bulk of them in Albuquerque. And Jan, every time they find something, he sends it out like, I didn't know about this, or did we know we even had this, that type of thing. And it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like a little boy in a candy shop.
Yeah.
In that, I didn't know you had that, on the counter. Can I have 2 of those?
Well, all of this little like archive hiding or research hiding and intrigue it's making me think of this Roswell journal that you were starting to kind of look into. I think it was close to a year ago now where we first talked about it. And
Yes, yeah.
Interesting because it first appeared like maybe 3 people were contributing to this journal, and definitely in a secret way because they knew somebody would try to come in and snatch it. So,
and see that on the face of it is odd in the sense that if it's a journal, why do you have different people putting in different entries, and none of them related to the other? And so I think what we have to continue to look at is the fact that this doesn't make sense. It's got quotes from Shakespeare. It's got quotes from different movies. It's got just standard daily routine activity logged, but again by 3 different people. And how, if they're sure that Major Jess Marcel, the intelligence officer at Roswell in 1947, if he's not the author or one of the authors, how did he gain possession of this? Because it happens to be at the very time of the alleged crash of the UFO in July of 1947. So as we suggested different cryptologists to examine and look for patterns and look for possible code words and breakdowns, I think the closest they came to the fact that it appears like one of the authors, because I provided all of the handwriting examples, and the one that they are pretty confident is one of the authors is the late Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Saunders, who was the base adjutant. He was head of operations at Roswell in 1947, and he's the one that when we tracked him down, and I talked to him, and he immediately made the comment about little men from Mars. So he was just poo-pooing, he was laughing it off. And then to find out after he died in 1995 that he had bought up as many paperback copies of the Randall Schmitt book, Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell, that he could. And he gave them out to his family as well as to his closest friends. And on the inner leaflet page, he wrote that this is true. I've never told anybody. I kept my word. So you talk about a deathbed handwritten statement. And yet then for the cryptologist to suggest, well, it appears like Saunders may be one of the authors of this logbook, this diary. Okay. That's the one thing you have to get into the mindset of the authors. And whether Marcel was one of them, they dealt with cryptic code every day. That was their business. How do you outsmart, your adversaries? Covert activity, warrants covert response, that type of mindset. So, and Saunders as the base adjutant, well, as the operations officer, every time they would have special flights, they would have a history of erasing flights. They would change tail numbers on the aircraft. They would even change serial numbers of crewmen, pilots. They would even erase you from the military if they could get away with it. And he was proud of that. So again, you have to think of it from their vantage point. And as a result, those that just look at it and go, well, it doesn't say anything about Roswell and July. Okay, fine. But if it did actually describe, in detail what had happened, I'd be more suspicious of that. Because then these men are like loose lips sink ships. Why are they so openly, writing this down? So I would expect them to be as vague and non-discreet as possible. And I just talked to the producer of that series, that first season, just 2 weeks ago. And they're very keen on doing a second season. And as I emphasized, we left too many doors open, whether with the logbook, the diary, the journal, the debris field, the possible locations of debris, other matters concerning Roswell that, for lack of funding, a TV series would provide. And so we expect to hear something in the next few weeks. And I think they would like to capitalize on the fact that it is the 75th anniversary. And if we were to start shooting by spring, they'd have something in the can ready for fall,
Right.
keeping the celebration.
How exciting. Well, yeah, we'll have to wait a few months and get an update on that as well. Grant, did you want to? It's nice to see your face now.
Yeah, I did. You should have told me
Really
my camera
anything
wasn't
right
on.
now. Or I was gonna
You
have
didn't know?
No, I didn't know. No.
That's what I was saying. The presidential seal was you standing
There you
behind the presidential podium.
Yeah. Now I got my fancy
Sorry,
background.
see, I'm
Yeah.
a rusty producer. I've been out of it for a while. But Don, let's also chat about ICER and what's going on with them, if anything's going on.
Oh, more than ever.
Right.
And as far as we have more and more countries that are wanting to come in, we
Mhm.
are about 30, which is what we need to be recognized by UNESCO, and
Which
then to be able to speak.
that's where we left off last time. You guys were working on gaining those 30 plus.
Well,
Yeah.
we had them, but then we had a death, and then we had two more that we had to release, only because we didn't feel that, excuse me, they were working up to our required standards.
Mhm.
We've had a number of people that were pretty much on the sideline, and we feel that there should be all in, everyone, engaged and participating in whatever capacity possible. They had a conference in San Marino last fall, and the government of San Marino is very interested in possible UN sponsorship. So that would expedite that entire process, which we've been going through in being recognized by the UN. And then there was another conference in Barcelona, and presently we've been invited to speak as a group at Dubai, Saudi Arabia.
Wow. It
So
really
all
is going international.
yeah, all exciting things, and that is providing us with a global stage.
Mhm.
And the whole and when we started in China, and then when we had meetings in Moscow, the whole point was not how are we going to empower the group, how are we going to work together, but no, how are we going to get the United States government, with the pressure of 30 or more countries finally saying enough is enough. We demand to know the truth. And when you have the wealth of that many researchers representing their respective countries, and the one common the denominator in all this is that we've all been having UFO experiences for 75 years, and most likely for centuries. And who is the United States to say, well, we're going to dictate terms on this subject for globally? They were never appointed. They were never elected. I think the one thing I feel that originally placed the America in the driver's seat was Roswell. That we got one. We actually had the technology, the hardware, and it becomes a pretty big bargaining chip. That all you have to do is remind, like the Soviet Union, oh, we're getting close. We're almost close to breaking the technology. Just imagine if we got a whole fleet of those saucers. We'll rule the planet. And so I feel, though, that as this has gone on, it has become clearly a cover-up of ignorance. That here in the States, we're just as ignorant of the reality, I mean, as far as the nature of the phenomena as anywhere. So wouldn't the ultimate irony be that the truth would come from another country? And that's also something I'm excited about, because every month we're having the chance to speak to a high-ranking officer within the Brazilian military or the Peruvian military. We have a liaison now to the Vatican, because one of the things that I even had Reverend Robert Spitzer of the Magis Center in Los Angeles promised me, I want to see the Vatican files for July of 1947. Just that month, because I'm convinced that one of the first people that President Harry Truman, when he got that first phone call from the Pentagon, Mr. President, we've had a crash down in New Mexico. Oh, did our boys get hurt? Well, they're not our boys, sir. We don't think they're from here. Oh, you mean, don't tell me they're Soviet? No, they're not from here. Well, what are you talking about? They're not from here, sir. And so I believe one of the first people he would have called up would have been Pope Pius XIII at that time, asking, what can the church tell me about this situation? Because the church would have had a 2,000-year head start. And so I would just like to document the fact that it won't necessarily provide the extent of the conversation, but just the fact that I can document it happened.
Right.
It's no different than why was everybody rushing to New Mexico immediately after this happened, like General Lawrence Craigie and General Nathan Twining and others. Everybody was going to Roswell over a weather balloon. Charles Lindbergh, we have eyewitness testimony that even Lindbergh was there. And then now the new question of whether Einstein was there. So these are.
Let me ask you, jump in with a question here on why would people like Einstein and people like this keep the secret? And that goes to what Landry said. Remember, General Landry said to his grandson, if I told you what happened, nothing you would ever be the same. And then I think back to what Jim Semivan said, where Jim Semivan, who's got to know more than the guy on the street, said when he had the beings in the room, he said his whole idea of reality was shattered, and that he didn't think that we would ever in his lifetime figure out what's actually going on, that this investigation, at one point I think he said they may not even know which direction to take. So what's your evaluation as to what do we really know? Is it just simple an ET crashed, or is it going to be this sort of scenario that is so complex that maybe they have no clue what's going on?
The latter, and I've been stating that for years. I believe, and based on their reaction, if it was strictly hardware, nuts and bolts, it's a matter of just determining it's not ours, it's not Soviet, it's someone else's. And biological, bodies, you only can examine them so far. You may eventually cryogenically preserve them, but then after that, there's nothing more that they're going to tell you. It comes down to, and you mentioned General Landry, Robert Landry, and he, as you remember, he used to brief President Truman on this very subject, on flying saucers, on a regular basis.
Yeah, and orally, which would mean that in 48 already, they already knew not to put it on paper.
Precisely. And so that he would make such a comment to his grandson that it would change the the way you look at the world for the rest of your life, that type of thing. And so I believe that's the explanation overall, that it is so beyond our perspective, so beyond our comprehension, that we can't get a handle on it. We can't bridge that technology. And especially if it is like when we had exchanged emails about even the flight characteristics and the propulsion of the craft that had crashed, and the fact that there were no moving parts on it. So then we start talking about it. We're talking thought projection, the idea that even their ability to perform as far as all of the fantastic, as far as maneuvers that break the laws of physics as we know them, are all because they're within the mind. That it isn't a physical body that's actually experiencing them. It's all almost like a dream state in that regard. And so, how do you do that in a lab? How do you reverse engineer that to the point that you can replicate the technology? I think we always talk about the deep dark secret of Roswell. What was so bad that they had to hide this? And it's one thing at the time when you get the Soviets breathing over their shoulders with the bomb, New Mexico, and you want to be the first one to match the technology, first one on the block, so to speak. But after now 75 years, I think it's mainly because they still have no idea what they're dealing with. That whether, especially if it's interdimensional, if it's parallel universe or something, that they just cannot replicate what they have right in front of them. And that's if they still even have it right in front of them. I know we've talked about this too in the past between the three of us, that when I'm asked today, where do you believe the craft, the evidence, the pieces are today? And I say, well, the government doesn't have them and the military doesn't have them. It's all in the private sector. And we've had firsthand witnesses at Boeing, at Lockheed, at Los Alamos, at Hughes, at Rand, at Patel, at General Electric, all talking about testing the wreckage. So it's all assimilated into the private sector because that's where you hope they have the breakthroughs. Doesn't mean you get it back, because all they have to do is, well, we're getting close. Give us another year, we're getting there. And in the meantime, those old order generals responsible, they pass on. And you start losing track. And before you know it, you have, as far as people, as far as CEOs in these major government, military, as far as contractors that are running everything, that are controlling, as far as the data concerning the evidence. And it may be another reason that they have nothing to present. They have nothing to disclose. They can present, a ton load of files and film possibly, but we lost the evidence, decades ago. Wouldn't that be the ultimate dilemma on their part? Talk about embarrassment.
Compartmentalized ignorance.
A weird question that's always sort of puzzled me, and I brought it up with all the different crashes. If you have heard the interview where Bob Bigelow said, Roswell, we had Roswell, the Russians had one, the Chinese had one, South America had one. He said, I think they're seeding the material, which is so I want to ask a question about metal material. How close have we ever gotten to having a piece that seemed to be really strange? Because as I said, Stan, there's a piece there where they're claiming that it was a piece of the Roswell metal. And the bizarre thing that always blows me away is if it crashes, remember they said you could take a sledgehammer and you couldn't dent the thing, but when it crashes, it breaks into these little tiny pieces like dropping a wine glass off a fifth floor balcony. Why the small pieces? Do you think there's any truth to this idea that we're being gifted this material?
That was a theory that was actually proposed by Dr. Mark Rodiger at QFOS, suggesting that what if it was planted? What if it was seeded? What if it was given us with the notion to soften the blow, to demonstrate their own mortality, that they're just as biological as we are in that regard? And little did he know that based on, just the behavior of the military, that everything is covered up, everything is swept under the carpet, and need to know the compartmentalization of the military. And I always point this out to a reporter, anyone within the media, that every time you speak to someone in politics or within the government / military, you're talking to people that are highly compartmentalized. They know what they know, and they know only what they have access to. So you're only getting one side of the story. So the three of us, we're not. So we can come at this from every direction imaginable. So we're in that regard, we're much better sources of the whole package. And I think it's one of the reasons that we've established as many good friends within the military, even because they realize that we can provide them with answers that they want to have access to. But when we talk about the materials and whether they've been able to have any breakthroughs, we know at the time of Roswell, within weeks after Roswell, Wright Field had contracted Battelle Institute just down the road in Columbus, Ohio. And the actual report describes it as self-healing metal. That's the terminology back in 1948. And then we managed to get a copy of not the first, we'd love to see the first, but a second project report, right? And it becomes a nitinol as far as nickel and
titanium.
And so, but there you still have to heat it first, and then you have to cool it down. The material of Roswell is right before your eyes. So just within the last couple of weeks, Harvard announced that they came up with a substance as strong as steel, yet as weightless as plastic.
Wow.
So we're getting there. Whether it's obviously been influenced, but even talking about where we were in 1947, technology-wise, material-wise, metallurgy-wise, and where we are today. Well, the point being, anything manufactured has to be malleable at a certain point, and it has a fracture point, a stress point. And whatever caused the Roswell ship, if it wasn't planted, again, that's just theory, speculation. But if it wasn't planted, whatever caused it to break up, it reached that plateau. It reached their fracture point. And as a result, it broke up. Now, we still, after all these years, we don't know. In fact, even the military, no one was able to surmise what caused the mid-air explosion. But again, it reached critical mass, which then caused all that wreckage.
Yeah. Nicole, you got a question?
I don't think so. Maybe I'm jotting down all notes for next time, another round in a few months. But I did want to we have a few minutes left. I know, Don, you said you had an hour today, so we are.
I've been going since 7 this morning, and other engagements, and I have another one coming right up. So it's family stuff. So.
This is a good time to wrap it up then. I think.
Well, let's get a question on what he thinks going on with Washington. That's the big story. I mean, that's the big.
That'll be our wrap up. We've hit on most of the questions if there's been any through the chat, so we won't have to scroll into there. But yeah, current state of ufology to take us home.
I'll cite the examples where on occasion Hynek would be informed that there was going to be an announcement from Washington. And he would be whisked from his home in Evanston, downtown Chicago, to WGN, and they would wait for this announcement. Never happened. Obviously, never happened. But I think the best example was when we worked with late Congressman Stephen Schiff, and where he was clearly being stonewalled by the Pentagon, by the White House, by all the branches of the military, all departments of intelligence. No one was cooperating. And no one stepped to the fore. No one, as far as said, wait a minute, you can't do this to a fellow congressman. You just can't, he has sent 3 letters at that time to Secretary of Defense Les Aspin, which were ignored. You can't do that. And that's the big difference in all of this. Back then, the subject was so taboo that it was a career breaker. I mean, I think the best example, Dennis Kucinich, just for talking about a possible sighting, and he could have just as well turned in his political affiliation badge. And so that's what's different today, that we have a collection with not only the Senate Intel Committee, but now with this newly appointed committee as far as to simplify the cataloging and the actual briefings of Washington on a regular basis. What we need to demand, and I was just with Steve Bassett last week, and what we have to continue to push for, that the bottom line is that we have congressional hearings. If we fall short, and where Congress would, perform their due diligence and provide immunity for all potential whistleblowers within each branch and the Department of Intelligence, that these people could come forward without fear of reprisal. And I think we not only would break this wide open, people would just be amazed at the level of the cover-up. But to hear pilots, SAC officers, people working with the CIA able to speak freely and describe some of the most profound experiences that defy conventional explanation, it would solve this overnight. It wouldn't necessarily tell us where, from why, and from who, but nonetheless, we'd all be saying, hey, we're working on the same thing as the government. But we can say that right now between the three of us. Anybody wants to give us a hard time, hey, we're assisting the government. They've opened the door, and now we're cooperating. They're working with us, and we're working with them. And we hope that, hearings will be as far as the end game in all this, because it has to be. If we just come up with another blue book final report, that type of thing, we haven't gained anything. We got to push more than ever.
Beautiful. Thank you, Don.
I see a
Thank you,
hashtag in our future.
Great.
Hashtag congressional hearings. There we go.
Yeah.
Hashtag UFO
Congressional
Twitter.
Hearings, great.
We can do this. Hey, it'll be like the most watched thing on C-SPAN in the last 25 years. So
Guaranteed.
we
Guaranteed.
can spin this.
Because it won't be political for the first time.
Right. And I that's why we do what we do, right? We see beyond the two sides of the aisle here. So
Exactly. What's political about the subject of UAPs, UFOs?
Yeah, that's what Reagan said. I mean, if we realized we had an invasion from a race, we would realize we're all just one people. We're all just God's children. That was Reagan's famous
We would
statement.
unite to defend the planet if we have to. Correct. Yeah. So that's a good note to end it on, Grant. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you guys both for joining me today.
Thank you for setting it up.
Soon. We're both busy, but yeah, let's stay in touch. And thanks for everybody watching on YouTube. I know my first live broadcast, it's bound to have a double stream or something. So thanks for finding us, and we'll talk soon. Thank you guys.
Okay. Bye-bye. Have a good
Stay
day.
well, everyone.